Chapter 5, the final chapter, is entitled End of a Dream. Day 4. Evening. After they finished lunch, Spike and Twilight spent most of the evenings having fun. Twilight really only had word games, so they played those, as well as memory and thinking games. Twilight did well, but Spike did surprise her on a few occasions. They also found some party games Pinkie had forgotten at the library last time they had a party here. But being they belonged to Pinkie, they had been for groups more than just a pony and a dragon, so they put them aside and to return to Pinkie for later. As evening rolled around and the rain started, Twilight and Spike didn't notice it at first until a rather loud crack of thunder interrupted a game of 20 questions. "I knew the Pegasi ponies had planned a storm. I just didn't think it was going to be this bad," Spike said as he went over to the window and looked outside. "Rainbow Dash said it was supposed to be a heavy shower. I guess they overdid it," Twilight said as she joined them at the window and watched as another heavy crackle of lightning rippled across the clouds, followed by a rumble of thunder. She felt a tingle run down her back from the thunder. It wasn't that she had been scared, just a bit uneasy. "So, Spike, what do you want to do now?" Twilight asked as she tried to get her mind off the storm. Spike looked up at Twilight and heard a rumble, this time from both of their stomachs and not from the storm outside. "I would say that answers that," Spike said with a sheepish smile. "God damn you! What do you... God! Does your stomach just... God! Do you have tapeworms? Always eating, Jesus." They had been both preoccupied with the games, and neither had noticed how late it had gotten. Twilight's cheeks reddened softly, and she nodded to him with a smile. "I guess it does, Spike." Twilight replied with a nod and walked with him to the kitchen. She let Spike work on dinner, some pasta with a vegetarian sauce, and some multi fresh grain bread. She decided to make a cup of that special tea Rhodey gave her to calm her nerves a little. Spike finished preparing the dinner for the two and sat it on the table. She came to the table with her tea and joined him as he fixed both of them a plate. "As always, Spike. It smells great." Twilight smiled at him and took a sip of the tea. It had a nice smooth flavor to it. She couldn't quite place what it was, but it was familiar. Reminded her of green tea, but with something extra mixed in. "Thanks, Twilight," Spike said as he smiled at her. Both ate in quiet for a few minutes before Spike spoke up. "So what were you thinking about?" he asked. When he noticed a confused look from Twilight, he smiled. "In a game of 20 questions," he clarified. "Oh, that!" She gave a soft giggle and smiled at him. "My book stand." She answered with a nod. She had almost forgotten about that, as she had been lost in thought about the flavor of the tea. She took another sip of it, and as she looked over at Spike. Spike chuckled at her. He had been way off with his guesses. "You're good at that game, Twilight. I was going for the telescope." "Just like in the sleepover episode. Look before you sleep," Spike said as he finished his plate and took it over to the sink. He went back and joined her at the table. Since she hadn't been studying today, he had little work in the way of chores to do. "Thanks, Spike. I do try to come up with easy stuff, I guess." She smiled at him. She had been eating more slowly and sipped her tea. "But not many people seem to be able to guess it. Not even when Applejack and Rarity had to sleep over here." She thought for a minute. "Come to think of it, last time I played 20 questions was during a storm. That time I'd been thinking of the telescope, though." Spike nods at her and smiles. "I remember hearing about that sleepover. Too bad I was away on business in Canterlot. Sounded like you guys had a lot of fun, all things considering." Spike said Twilight had told him about that night, most of which Applejack and Rarity had argued about their differences. "Glad things worked out in the end for those two," he added with a smile. "Yeah, that was a fun night after everything got settled," Twilight said as she smiled at Spike, then looks over one of the little statues Rarity had made of the tree branch that came through the window. She kept at one and gave the rest to her friends. "Those two can be so different, but also so similar," she added to herself, more than to Spike with a soft chuckle. After dinner, when everything had been cleaned up, she went back to the main hall for tea and took a seat near a window, slowly sipping the tea as she watched the skies quietly. She watched the lightning dance across the clouds. She had seemed lost in thought, so Spike had left her alone for now. He went to do a little cleaning up around the library, making sure everything had been put away. Twilight had been lost in thought. Her mind wandered on things that had happened since she come to Ponyville and all of her friends she had made. Even the three little fillies, Applebloom, Sweetiebelle, and Scootaloo. She smiled and thought about the three, so full of energy and potential. She took another sip of her tea and finished it off the glass. She sat in a small table near her. Then looked at the clock. She noticed how late it had gotten. With the cloudy sky, it was hard to keep track of what time it was by the position of the sun, or the moon and stars. She moved to get up. "I'm heading to bed, Spike," she told him as she made her way up the stairs. "All right, Twilight. Sleep well," he told her. As he picked up her empty cup and went to the kitchen to finish the last of his chores, he said more quietly to himself, Sweet dreams. You could use them. He hoped his plan worked as well as Rarity's tea. Once his chores had been finished, he went around and turned out the lights and went upstairs. He didn't go to bed, though. He went and sat by the window, half watching Twilight, half watching the storm outside. He wanted to be awake in case Twilight did have another nightmare. Twilight wasn't sure how long she waited in the holding cell. There was no windows to look out. The only light came from a lantern hanging from the roof. She tried to keep track in her mind, but after an hour she lost count. She sighed softly and paced around the room quietly. She did know she had been here long enough. They brought her something to eat. Some hay, bread, an apple, and a cup of water. Though she wasn't very hungry, so she just drank the water and waited till they took the tray away. She started to count again. Almost an hour after they took the tray away, the guards opened the door to her cell and let her out. She carefully left the room and looked at the guards. Unicorns' horns seemed constantly on the ready as well. She herself still had the clamp on her horn to keep her magic locked. "Follow us. Don't even try to run," one of the unicorns said firmly, and Twilight nodded. The guards walked her down the hallway. After a few minutes of walking, she started to recognize where they had been going. Princess Celestia's throne room. She gulped and started to shake a bit, fear running down her back. She knew this couldn't be a good sign. As much as she wanted to talk to her friends, she knew prisoners going to the throne room didn't end well. She might have been Celestia's prized student and a friend of hers, but that didn't mean she wasn't subject to equestrian law or punishment. She took a deep breath as doors opened to a large throne room. She saw ponies had filled the audience chamber, Pegasi hovering high overhead, and all of them watching her. She entered with the 4 unicorn guards around her. She walked slowly forward. The royal guards made sure there was a pathway. She kept her eyes focused straight ahead, so she wouldn't have to see the other ponies. She was scared. Well, it's spelled scarred, but it could be scared. She was scared of seeing her parents, her brother, or her friends in the crowd, afraid to see the look of disappointment or judgment in their eyes at what she had done. She raised her head and looked forward. Standing on the dais in front of their thrones was Princess Celestia and Luna. Both looked on as she came forward and lowered herself in a deep bow. "We demand silence in the court," Luna said in her booming rural Camelot voice. The room instantly fell into a dead silence, and all the ponies gathered and stared straight ahead and paid attention to Luna as she continued. "Rise, Twilight Sparkle! Stand and face your judgment!" Her voice still booming in the rural Camelot voice to make sure all present heard loud and clear. Twilight shivered, but did as she was told. She got up onto her hooves and looked up at the princesses, her sadness and fear still present inside of her. Luna looked stern as she looked back down at her Twilight, but even she couldn't hide the regret in her light cyan eyes. Celestia was harder to read. Twilight had known her most of her life, but if she wanted to, the princess could hide her emotions well. "Twilight Sparkle, the royal court of Camelot has found you guilty of killing your assistant, destroying the library, assaulting royal guards, and evading capture." Princess Celestia spoke, her eyes on Twilight as she did, her voice loud and clear, but soft as well. She didn't use a royal Camelot voice like Luna did. She didn't have to. Twilight felt dread overtake her as Celestia continued to speak. "These actions, while they may have started with a simple accident, cannot be overlooked, not even by me. So it is with deep regret and a heavy heart that I must pass my judgment on you, my once faithful student," Celestia said, and raised her head to look out at the ponies gathered in the throne room. Twilight could see the emotion Celestia had been hiding start to surface, a look of both disappointment and sadness as her teacher and now judge found her guilty. The look of disappointment stung Twilight hard. It was the last thing she wanted to do in her life, was to disappoint her teacher. "Twilight Sparkle, you are to be stripped of your magic, and sentenced to living out the rest of your days in Camelot's prison as a hornless unicorn," Celestia said as she clapped her hoof loudly on a piece of wood, signaling she had finished passing judgment. Twilight's eyes went wide in horror. She had heard rumors of unicorns being stripped of their magic and losing their horns. The prospect terrified her, and her heart started to race in her chest. The gathered crowd gasped, and a handful from Ponyville started to cry when they heard the sentence. Twilight could hear Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie, and Rarity crying, and looked over. She felt tears roll down her cheek when she saw her friends gathered with her parents, Shining Armor, her brother, and his wife, Princess Cadence. Twilight looked back up at Celestia and took a deep breath. Celestia spread her wings wide and lowered her horn towards Twilight. A beam of magic leaped from Celestia's horn and into Twilight's, which sent an immense pain through her head and went down into her body. The magic gripped her body and raised her up off the ground. She opened her mouth to let out a cry of pain, but she couldn't find her voice. It felt like she was in the grip of Celestia's magic for an eternity. pain coursing through her head, but it had only been about 3 minutes before she was back on the ground, laying on her side, a light wisp of smoke coming off her, and for a moment it looked like she was dead. Fluttershy had fainted, and Rarity was by her side to take care of her. A few guards had to stop Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Shining Armor from going to check on Twilight. After a few moments, Twilight moved and slowly got to her hoofs, a little on the unsteady at first. The crowd all gasped when they saw her. Her horn was gone, replaced with a small patch of gray fur. Her cutie mark had also disappeared, also replaced with just a patch of gray fur. Damn. Twilight looked up toward Celestia, who looked back at her, with a sad look before she turned and quietly left the throne room. Luna raised her head and spoke to her in a loud, counter-loud, royal voice. "Court dismissed," she said, punctuating the point with a crack of thunder. Oh my god. That's worse than Judge Judy. The 4 unicorn guards came up to her and started to lead her away from the court. She still felt woozy on her head, and her head hurt so bad. She caught sight of herself in a shiny piece of decoration in the throne room, and shuddered. For the first time she could see that her horn was gone as well as her cutie mark, the thing that made her special. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks slowly as the guards took her out of the court and back down the hall to her holding cell to wait before being transferred to prison. After they reached the holding cell, she went inside without any protest, and the door closed. She went over to a hay bed and curled up on it. She felt defeated and the headache was bad. She just wanted to sleep now. She let her emotions overtake her, and she finally broke down to sobs of pain and sadness. She turned her head to look at the gray patch where her cutie mark had been, before she flopped her head back down, and closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. Everyone. I'm so sorry. I let you all down. Spike. Forgive me." "He can't. He's dead." A loud crash of thunder caused her to jump to her hooves and look around. But she wasn't in her cell. She stood in nothingness. She looked around a bit more. She grew confused before she could see herself. She almost thought she had been looking in a mirror, but then she saw her horn and cutie mark. She remembered that she didn't have either anymore, and for some reason, the horned version of herself seemed to be taller than she was. The horned Twilight had a wide-eyed look as she found herself looking at the smaller, hornless, and cutie markless version of herself. She slowly walked around the hornless version of herself and looked her over, before stopping as she stood in front of her. "I think I understand now. The dreams and the uneasy feelings," Horned Twilight said as she looked at her hornless counterpart. "Am I dreaming?" Hornless Twilight asked the other quietly, her mind still feeling foggy and hurt from being stripped of her horn. She watched the horned version of herself shake her head as she came over to stand in front of her, moving a hoof up to gently rub her to the front of her head, easing the pain away just a little before setting the hoof back down. Horned Twilight took a deep breath and closed her eyes before shaking her head slowly. "No, you're not dreaming. I am. And it's time to end this dream," she said as she lowered her horn, the tip starting to glow as she touched it to her forehead where Hornless Twilight's horn used to be. A soft, warm glow started to cover both of them. Out of the shadows, a pair of soft, cyan blue eyes watched. Luna's horn glows like cobalt as she worked her own magic. Hornless Twilight fades away and disappears, leaving on a light ripple of magic. Horned Twilight opens her eyes and sighs softly. She looked around and she spotted Princess Luna as she came out of the shadows. Princess Luna made from the shadows over the Twilight and looks down at Twilight, who is bowing. "Twilight Sparkle, no need to bow to me. I'm not the princess you know," Luna said, her voice soft and normal since she had no need to use a royal Camelot voice here. Twilight stood and looked up at Luna. "What do you mean, Princess Luna? Are you from the same timeline as the other me?" She asked a little confused, but Luna nodded her head to confirm what she thought. "Will she be all right?" Twilight asked, a few tears threatening to roll down her cheeks. "Do not worry, Twilight Sparkle. She will be just fine, provided you take good care of her," Luna said with a kind smile as she saw Twilight grow slightly more confused at the statement. "Let us explain, and you will understand. After the trial, I found my sister in grief over her actions," Luna said as she started to explain. "We talked it over and thought it was for the best she must start a new life. While dream walking, I felt their presence and I knew what must be done. The world of dreams is much different than people think. It connects the different timelines together, not unlike a spider's web," Luna said, and Twilight considered this information on dreams before hearing Luna speak again. "I used my powers to bring you both to this central location. Though to bring our Twilight here in a physical form, I had to turn to a foal. I allowed you two to meet first. Then when you went to remove the connection you had to do the experiment, I used my power to send her to your timeline," Luna said as she finished explaining what happened. "What is going to happen to her in my world? Where will I be able to find her?" Twilight asked, added the look of concern on her face now at the thought of a young, hornless Twilight now in their timeline. "She must be confused, lost, and scared," she continued, tears now freely flowing down her cheeks. Calm yourself, Twilight Sparkle. Do not worry. I arranged it with your Princess Luna. She will be taken care of. Things will be explained to her, and she will be guided to you in Ponyville. Now you must go to your dream world and be at peace, Luna said, dipping her horn down. It started to glow, and in a bright flash of light blinded Twilight for a moment. Longest dream. Twilight slowly opened her eyes and sat up in her bed. She looked around. She could feel her tears still roll down her cheeks, but she smiled softly. She quietly got out of bed and made her way into the bathroom to wash her face off and look at herself in the mirror. Horn still in place. She turned and saw her cutie mark. She gave her reflection a sad smile. "Goodbye, Twilight," she said softly to her hornless counterpart. She got herself a drink of water before she made her way to her bed and paused near Spike's bed. When she didn't see him there, she looked around quietly. Before she saw him in the window, curled up, sleeping. She gave him a smile and rolled her eyes lightly. "Oh, Spike, you'll catch your cold sleeping there," she said softly, and used her magic to gently move him from the window to his bed and covered him up. She leaned down and kissed him softly on the forehead, to which, even in sleep, it made a face at. She smiled at him again. She went back to bed and curled up under the covers. She closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. This time, her dreams were peaceful and pleasant. She didn't have any more bad dreams. Again? Ever? 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 Just her normal, happy dreams of spending time with her kind, generous, honest, loyal, happy friends. One dream did stick out, though, of a small purple filly with gray patches of fur on her flank being removed from a cell in the Camelot dungeon by Princess Luna and taken to a suite in the Camelot Royal Palace, and where she was allowed to recover as Luna explained things to her. But the dream was vague, and when she woke, she couldn't remember too much about it. So that's the story. That's Twilight Sleepless Nights by Lisa Aaron Wolf, and it was better than, like I said, the Generation Even Time Has Forgotten, and it was bound to happen. I hate this story so much I just forgot what it was. There were grammar mistakes, but that's nothing to sneeze at. It a good characterization and a pretty interesting plot. And I like how Lisa used Luna once again in the dream, just like Sleepless in Ponyville. It's kind of what this fan fiction reminded me of. There wasn't much of Rainbow Dash or Scootaloo. This is, I guess you could say, Twilight's own Sleepless in Ponyville. Pretty much. So I like how she brought that into the story. I like the idea of hornless Twilight and horned Twilight, interacting and stuff. This is definitely a very interesting fan fiction. I'd recommend it. It's very short and pretty unknown because it only has 26 likes and 374 views. So with that in mind, that's it. I read the story, and I guess I'll see you guys later. Thank you for watching and listening, and goodbye.